Coming up, the prognosis on the new critical care block at PMH. Ahead, the Prime Minister takes a tour.
Could Panama provide the out for Cuban detainees? Tonight, what Miami protesters are saying about an asylum offer.
And Team Bahamas in semi-final action at the World Track and Field Championships. We've got the highlights. The National Report starts now.
Now in HD. ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight. This segment of the news is brought to you by BTC, powered by Lime.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Keish Latterly.
And I'm Candino Knowles. Well, it's been identified as the single largest investment in healthcare infrastructure in the country.
And today, the country's leader, along with several cabinet ministers, toured the multi-million-dollar critical care block at the Princess Margaret Hospital.
And while government officials were impressed, our Andrew Knowles tells us that there are a few concerns.
Officials say construction on the new critical care block is 95% complete and within budget. Out of the $55 million budgeted for the project, about $51 million has been spent on the 66,000 square foot addition that expands 3 levels. The block will be outfitted with an additional $20 million in state-of-the-art medical equipment for 6 operating theaters, putting the Bahamas on the cutting edge.
And the one concern I had was whether or not, having spent all of this money, someone like Dr. Ernie Sands or Dwayne Sands would be able to perform complex heart surgical interventions here. I'm told that the physical premises are sufficiently accommodating to enable that to happen. Clearly, then it's a question of the right equipment. So for me, that was some kind of gratification to know that we have the right size here.
Prime Minister Perry Christie, along with several cabinet ministers, toured the project Monday afternoon. The new facility will consist of 18 recovery beds, 20 intensive care unit rooms, 48 neonatal intensive care beds, a new main entry, and new laboratory facilities. But Health Minister Dr. Perry Gomez still has some concerns over the amount of beds in the ICU.
20 beds in an ICU in today is less than twice as many that we had for the previous 50 years. And the population has quadrupled, and so the need for ICU beds is much more. And so we will probably still have the issue, but not to the same extent we had.
And with millions of dollars in equipment, the priority now for hospital officials is training.
We started a critical care training program, which is certified by the Royal College in the United Kingdom. And so training is ongoing for the critical care block. And so we're satisfied that nurses are being trained. In addition to nurses being trained, there are other categories of staff that are also being trained so that once we open, we have the staff that we need.
Now, construction officials will hand over the new state-of-the-art facilities to the government sometime in October. Shortly thereafter, it will be officially opened to the public. Andrew Knowles, ZNS Network News.
Cuban protesters in Miami claim that the Panamanian government has agreed to political asylum for 19 Cuban nationals and are continuing to seek a third country for 13 others.
Leader of the democracy movement, Ramon Sol Sanchez, told ZNS News that after weeks of protests, the hunger strike and other protests are over. Now, the group released a video purporting abuse of detainees at the detention center. The government has questioned its authenticity from the start. Nonetheless, Cuban protesters in Miami held a demonstration out at sea, holding up signs to discourage travel to the Bahamas. And for the last 3 weeks, the group held a hunger strike in downtown Miami under a tent with pictures of persons who were allegedly abused. We also learned last week that a 30-foot trailer was also on display in Miami, appealing to Prime Minister Perry Christie to stop alleged abuse at the detention center. Sanchez says all of this comes to an end today, but in the meantime, they will try to rebuild their strained relationship with the Bahamas.
We'll stop the hunger strike and go in front of the consulate of the Bahamas with renewed message. Bahamas is beautiful again. We're going to put some flowers in front of the building and in a signal of friendship with the people of the Bahamas. And our boycott will be over. Yes, they have agreed to accept 19. We're working very hard for another 13 with one country and the rest with another country. So they will admit they have already approved the visa. You can find that in an official statement that has circulated in the international media and also in the Panamanian media. So that fulfills point number 4 of our campaign. We trust that the Prime Minister of the Bahamas will keep his word that he will release all of them if we were to, take them out of the country.
Minister of Foreign Affairs Fred Mitchell told Parliament today that the government of the Bahamas is prepared to release forthwith 4 Cuban detainees from the detention center if they're accepted by the United States or if a third country wishes to accept them.
Well, for several weeks now, this group of detainees has been alleging abuse while housed at the detention center off Carmichael Road. Now, reading into the record of Parliament today, Minister Fred Mitchell made it very clear that the Bahamas does not condone, incite, or support the cruel and inhumane treatment of any detainee in any facility in the Bahamas. Minister Mitchell says the government is continuing to work with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in processing asylum seekers and refugees in accordance with the UN treaties, customary international law, and the laws of the Bahamas, and with U.S. officials.
We are advised that officials of the United States have reviewed and are currently adjudicating the cases of 4 of the detainees to determine whether they can be accepted and resettled into the United States. In 3 of these cases, it appears that the detainees had previously been permanent residents of the United States of America, and the 4th case was deemed by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees to be eligible for residence in a third country. The asylum seekers are only temporarily detained in prison because they were engaged in disorderly and violent behavior at the detention center, and their removal from that facility was necessary both for their protection and the protection and safety of others at the detention center.
Minister Mitchell says the government has agreed for a U.S. official to visit the detention center. While no date or time for that visit was given, that senior U.S. official has been identified as Mr. Simon Henshaw. He's Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Population, Refugees, and Migration. Minister Mitchell concluded by saying the protesters in Miami are misdirected, they are defaming and slandering our country, and he pledged to continue to work to defend the reputation of the Bahamas. Now, Prime Minister Perry Christie said the government will soon appoint former President of the Bahamas Communications and Public Officers Union and veteran trade unionist Robert Farquharson to the post of Director of Labor. Mr. Christie said Mr. Farquharson has the right qualifications for the job.
We have had him as a consultant to labor matters. He's had a good career. We feel he has a good relationship with trade unions. We know that he knows the law. He's now qualified in the law. We know that he has the passion for it, and we feel that the current director is fine, but we're promoting him, and therefore we will have the position given to Mr. Farquharson.
Mr. Farquharson said even though the appointment has yet to be officially released, he's hoping to propel the labor sector once his new job begins.
I know that the government has indicated to me that they want the position of Director of Labor to be a very strong voice to ensure that not only the trade union movement but industrial relations in our country, the environment is calm, it's safe, and it's conducive to good productivity, so our economy can go from strength to strength. We want to ensure that the Department of Labor runs efficiently, that I am in a position to advise the government of the Bahamas on all matters relating to labor and international relations in the Bahamas, and that we have a department that is responsive to the needs of both the employers and the employees in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
In other news from the House of Assembly today, the Member of Parliament for Golden Gates, also the Minister of Labour, the Honourable Shane Gibson, wants those opposition members who boycotted this morning's session of Parliament to reimburse the Treasury for their willful act of taking time off from doing the people's business.
Today marked the first day of a 2-day suspension from Parliament for Opposition Leader, the Honourable Dr. Hubert Minnis. All of his parliamentary colleagues, with the exception of South Abaco MP Edison Key, have decided during the suspension not to attend Parliament either.
Hopefully their constituents will get on Facebook, on social media, and let them know exactly how they feel about them not being present here today. And Mr. Speaker, I would hope that just as they withdrew themselves from being a part of this legislative process today, I would hope that they would each individually write checks back to the public treasury, reimbursing the treasury for not reporting to work these couple of days. As you know, we hold all employees of the government in the Bahamas accountable, and when employees don't show up to work, they're not compensated. And so I'd expect, Mr. Speaker, for these honorable men and women to do the honorable thing, and when they come back, they enter these chambers with a check in their hands. And Mr. Speaker, I'm now reimbursing the treasury for time I had off.
Meantime, Housing Minister Ken Dorset said the 30-day deadline for landowners of various properties throughout New Providence to rid their spaces of shantytown communities has expired. He added that the government has already started prosecuting landowners who continue to conduct illegal operations, but there are some who have made a noteworthy effort to comply. The real challenge, he said, is finding accommodations for the hundreds of people who will be displaced.
Is that it is not a simple matter. There are a number of Bahamians who live in these areas, and so for us, the issue of relocation, dislocation is one that has to be addressed. For me, I wear both hats, the Minister of Environment as well as housing, and so there's no doubt that there is going to have to be some housing solution with respect to what we do. But the Ministry of Social Services has been very much involved in this process, and they are continuing to conduct their assessments as to the number of children and people who occupy these lands. Immigration is a part of it, and so clearly where there are illegals, then the law will be followed. But to the extent that we have legal persons living on these shanty towns, and for those who are Bahamians, as the Prime Minister said, we are going to find a humane solution to resolving this.
Well, still to come, find out the story behind this accident, and this is just the beginning of the story.
And then in sports, the latest from the World Track and Field Championships. You're watching The Bahamas Tonight.
This portion of the news is brought to you by Lux Men's Warehouse.